I was thinking about our discussion in generosity last night, and I thought that I would consider a text that we didn't discuss, in fact, we didn't even read at all, that might give us some distinctions to help us think more clearly about the question. I don't know that it would resolve it, but give us perhaps a little bit of clarification, and at least in terms of things Aristotle actually says. Aristotle makes a distinction between generosity and a different virtue called magnificence. Now, generosity is a virtue that's attainable and should be attained by all people as people. Anyone who has to spend money should spend money generously. Now, certain people can spend more money. And so we made this distinction last night in this idea that some people, it's within their means to spend larger quantities of money. Now, Aristotle actually has different requirements for people who are extremely wealthy. And he says that it's not just a matter of them being generous, but them being magnificent. And this is the idea that if you have tons and tons of cash, you are capable of doing things with that money that goes beyond just the expectations of a private person in their private life and trying to be generous and doing what's right and good for them and their family. But a magnificent person actually has a different social role, so that the goods that they achieve through spending their wealth are meant to go beyond their own sort of personal world, but extend out to ultimately the common good. Aristotle writes in Book 4, Chapter 2, on page 92, "For a man is magnificent not when he spends on himself, but when he spends for the common good." Now, someone who is not magnificent, but similar to the people who throw these crazy parties for their 16-year-old daughters, Aristotle would call vulgar. And no offense is intended, at least by me in this kind of situation, but it seems like kind of a vulgar display of wealth. And so the distinction that Aristotle introduces that might help us think about this is on page 93, where Aristotle writes, "Where he ought to spend much money, he spends little, and where little, he spends much." I think one of the things that we perhaps find frustrating when we see a 16-year-old girl getting a Bentley and Puff Daddy coming to a party and all this stuff is it seems like, okay, it's one thing to want to honor your daughter and do it in an amazing way because she is worthy of this and you're her father and you want to do something wonderful and good for her. However, we feel like, gosh, isn't there a better way of spending that money? Like, isn't there some other good that you could have achieved where you could have spent perhaps half as much on a car and taken that money and applied it to some other good that's more worthy than just in a vulgar way, extravagantly gifting to your family? And we have this expectation and this hope that people who are extremely wealthy will use that wealth to bring about a kind of common good in society. What do we do? Are we going to blame the person for wanting to honor their daughter? Of course not. I want to honor my kids, and I want to have great parties for them because they're wonderful and worth it. But I also have to weigh what's the appropriate object. And someone of extreme wealth needs to weigh this even more appropriately because of what good could be achieved by that wealth that's perhaps not being achieved because it's being spent on their 16-year-old daughter. I hope that helps the issue. And it's not too long-winded. All the best.